Here's Cassidy Tuttle.
So I am that weird person that's talking to you about succulents, but not really. We're gonna talk about how you can find your own succulent niche. And fortunately, Mariah's already introduced you to the idea of why being in a niche is a good thing. And so I'm gonna take that a little bit further and tell you how to find the niche that works for you. And actually, just like 15 minutes ago, I came up with a new niche site idea. So I was walking in the bathroom and I'm like, oh, I need a haircut. But then I thought, I should make a niche site about pixie cuts and where to find a good hairstylist for pixie cuts, because it's harder than when you have long hair. So if someone wants to create that, go for it. I will share all of my niche site ideas with you. I have a lot. Coming up with them is not the hard part. It's actually building it out. So like Barrett was saying, I write about succulents, and if you don't know what they are, these are succulents. So most people recognize like aloe vera, cactus. If you're from Southern California, ice plants everywhere. So 5 years ago, I didn't know what a succulent was. I'm a photographer by profession, and I had subscribed to a bunch of different magazines, because 5 years ago you looked at magazines. And I kept seeing these plants, and I'm like, oh, these are kind of cool. And I do food and product photography, so that kind of fell into my space of it doesn't move, and I don't have to talk to people. So I am like, okay, this is kind of cool. And then my cousin had some in her wedding bouquet, which I was in charge of bringing to the wedding. And that was the thing that kind of like kick-started this. So in the middle of the winter, I'm from Utah, and in January we get this nasty inversion, and you just don't want to be outside. So my mom and I go to a nursery, kind of greenhouse, to like get some happy feelings. And I bought my first 3 succulents. And I started looking online for information on how to propagate them. Because if you don't know, succulents propagate really easily, at least most of them do. And I say that now, and I know what that means. But at the time, I'm like, so what exactly do I do? And I was looking for like excruciating detail on how to propagate succulents, and there wasn't anything out there. So on my photography blog, I just started documenting what I was trying. Everyone said, pull a leaf off, see what happens. So I'm like, okay, but so I kind of made it scientific-ish, as scientific as I go. But then a few months later, I happened upon Smart Passive Income and realized like, oh, you can make money online, that's cool. So I put analytics on my site and realized that no one was coming to my photography portfolio. Everyone was coming to my succulents. And I was actually getting traffic from Google. So I'm like, oh, okay, this is cool. So on Valentine's Day, 2013, I bought the URL Succulents and Sunshine after much debate on the name. And from there, it turned into a very intentional business. And like I said, I didn't know anything about succulents. And I was ranking for keywords around succulents. So propagating succulents was like the first search term I started getting traffic from. And at the time, like 100 people a month were searching for propagating succulents. But it was enough that it got me interested and made me realize, okay, I think I can do this. And at one point in time, I was like, if I can make like $1,000 a month, that would be awesome. Like, pay for all these succulents that I'm buying now, and be great. Maybe go on like a trip or something. But I knew that people were making 6 figures, 7 figures with their online businesses, and this whole idea of a niche site. But I thought like, there's no way that I'd ever make that much with succulents. I'm like, maybe 5,000 a month, right? But since 2013, we've doubled our income year over year, our revenue. And we're hoping to double or triple again this year, and we'll see how that goes. But the thing that I learned from meeting other bloggers and other people in the online space is I was really unusual. I didn't know of anyone else who blogged only about one thing. And at these like kind of mom blog conferences I went to, it's like, so what's your blog about? Oh, I write about growing succulents. And they're like, what else do you write about? And I'm like, no, that's it, just succulents. And they're like, really? Okay. So then I'd ask what they blog about, and it's like, oh, just a little bit of everything, right? Like food and some home decor and parenting and homeschooling and, like list off a bunch of different things. And I realized that was the thing that made my business work. People were coming to their sites, and still are, and there are lifestyle blogs that work, but it takes a lot more effort because you have people coming for so many different topics. If I post anything that is not related to succulents, and as an example, my mom is an artist, and so we thought it'd be fun to do succulent coloring pages. So still succulents, right? But coloring pages was kind of like the main idea. Totally flopped, did not work at all. Like there were a few people that were like, oh, this is fun, but nothing like if I post like, what kind of soil do you need for your succulents? So that's when I realized that like being in a niche is so important. And I actually have found now that succulents is too big a niche for me. So I am working on narrowing down even further from succulents. And you think I'm kidding, but I'm really not. So one of my assistants has been looking to do something online. I'm like, well, why don't you take cactus? Like, you can just have all mine and write about just cactus. So that was like one track I looked at going on. And right now, the one I'm kind of focused on is cold hardy succulents. So there are succulents that will survive frost and ice and Utah winters, like well below freezing. And it's another untapped market. There are not people writing about cold hardy succulents. So that's where I'm going. So what I've learned is it's all about finding something that you either want to learn about or that you already know about. And it doesn't matter how small you think it is. You can always get bigger. Getting bigger is easy. Getting smaller is really hard. Because even right now, I have so many people from different, growing in like California and India and the Philippines and all over in all these different growing environments. So as I'm like moving toward cold hardy, they're like, wait, but what happened to our indoor growing? Or why don't you write something for those of us who are in like a hot and humid climate? That's just not what I do. It's not what I know. So start out ultra focused. The smaller you can be, the better, because you can always add to it later. So if you currently have a site, I have what I call a brain dump, where I just write down any idea that I come up with, any idea, good or bad, it's written down. And there are thousands probably of ideas on this list for succulents. And that's why I'm niching down more, is because I have so many topics that I can write about that people are interested in and asking me questions about, that I need to be even more focused and really serving that audience. So kind of my threshold, if you will, is 100. So if you currently have like 100, well, if you have more than 100 ideas, you can probably niche further. If you're less than 100, you're probably okay. So this is my wall of crazy, as my husband calls it. I had my assistants, this took like 10 or 15 hours for them to put together. This is my brain dump on paper on a wall at my house. And seeing it physically like that on my wall, like taking up the whole bedroom wall that it was in, made me realize, like, there's no way I'm getting to all of that, and especially not by myself. So we've just taken sections of that, and we're moving in that direction. So you think succulents is small, but it's really not. And you can probably niche down more from where you're at. If you get something this big, you should be niching down more, because you're going to be all over the place with this. So then comes the question, okay, so if I have all of this, how do I know where to go, right? So I have done a poll of my audience, And the lifelines in Who Wants to Be a Millionaire are a great reference. Phone a friend, right? And then ask the audience. So I do surveys like every other month with my audience, and I ask them what blog posts they want to see next. So I'll have a list of a few, and then I give them a place where they can tell me if there's something that they really want to know about. And it's amazing how much consistency I get with those open-ended answers. So right now, I have just over 40,000 emails or people on my email list. So I get a pretty good response when I ask a survey. So if like 15, 20, 30 people are saying the same thing in that open-ended box, I know that that's probably a direction I need to go, maybe even more so than the options I've suggested. If you don't have an audience already, find out where your people are hanging out online. With succulents right now, people are on Instagram, and that's where the kind of succulent community is hanging out. So I would just hop on there, find some people, start asking them, like, what's your biggest struggle, with succulents, or what can't you find the information for? And then once you have that answer, figure out if it's something you even want to do, right? So I have had a lot of people ask me, how do I grow succulents in a hot, humid environment? It's not something I'm interested in, and it would be something really difficult for me to do considering that I've been living in a 4-season climate and very dry and not at all humid. So I am not interested in writing about hot and humid. So I'm kind of ignoring that because I also have people telling me, I live in Chicago, what can I grow outside in Chicago? And that's actually how so I actually wrote the book, Idiot's Guide to Succulents. And the publishers found me through Google and were impressed by the photos and the content, and they said, we love Deborah Lee Baldwin's books. So she's the one other author on succulents right now. But her stuff is very focused to Southern California. Whether or not she knows that, that's really who she's targeting. And so the Idiot's Guide just said, we love that, but we can't have that in Chicago. So we want a succulent book for us. And you'll find that the more focused you are, the more likely you are to get that kind of exposure and response, because people can tell that you know what you're talking about and you're fulfilling a very specific need. Then once you kind of figure out, okay, this is what I want to do, then it's time to do your research and figure out if it's really a valid idea. So I have no idea if a pixie cut website is really helpful. I want it, so there's at least one person in the world that would be like, yeah, where can I get a good stylist to do my hair? But I would start finding other people with short hair, asking if they have, a stylist that they really like using for their cut, or looking at different places online, and just trying to get that validation that, yes, there are people out there who are looking for that same answer that you are willing to give them. And just kind of a plug, one of the best resources I have found for kind of figuring out that process is actually Pat Flynn's book, Will It Fly? If you're in kind of that idea phase, trying to figure out, is this a good idea? I highly recommend reading that. It's just a really good overview, and just will walk you through what you need to know to validate your idea and make sure it's going to work. So then the other thing that you'll want to do is, if you already have a site, you want to take a look at where you're at and figure out if what you have is going to work, if you need to change it, if you need to remove things, if you need to add things. So even with where I'm at right now, some of my old content just isn't relevant. It was very much like, today I did this with my succulents and then I did this with them. But it's not really instructional. So the site audit helps you figure out where to focus. And after talking to your audience and then figuring out what you want to write about, you can see the gaps. So right now I know I don't have enough information about growing cold hardy succulents. I have a lot on growing indoors and just in containers in general, but I don't have anything about growing in the ground. So that's where I'm focusing is, okay, what posts can I write that will answer the questions that I have and that my audience has about growing succulents in the ground in a 4-season climate. And it's just having that brain dump, just writing down every idea that you can think of is really important, because you think you're going to remember the things that you wrote down or aren't writing down, but you really won't. And even the bad ideas, I've been amazed at like coming back to my list and reading through things. I'm like, that was really dumb. But actually, if I turned it this way, and some of my best posts have come from like those ideas that didn't seem that great, but if I just twist it a little bit or take it in a new direction, end up being some of the more popular content. And really the most important thing is that once you figure out your plan, you have to actually do it. So if you take nothing else from this, just remember to do it, like the whole Nike thing, right? And then I love this Tony Robbins quote: the path to success is to take massive, determined action. And one of the things that I've had people comment on with my business is that I'm not afraid to try something new. I have learned that the more times I do something wrong, the more I learn about how to do it right. And growing succulents is actually the perfect example of that. I did a post on my site about what my succulent garden really looks like, because most of my site looks like this, like really beautiful images of succulents. They're all perfect and healthy. And that's not what my garden looks like at all. I've been renting for the last 5 years, so I don't have succulents in the ground for the most part. So I have plants on my windowsill. I took a corner of my parents' backyard. I have just like a baker's rack with succulents on it. Just stuff stashed everywhere. Not pretty. Some of them not very healthy, which is great, because then I can say, here's how you kill a succulent. Because I've done it about 500 different ways. But really, and even when I think I'm doing well, like we just moved, and I moved my succulents to a new area, totally sunburned them. So guess what? Told my people all about that. Here is how you sunburn your succulents, and here's how you don't sunburn your succulents. So I want you to start thinking of something either from the site that you currently have, a way you can niche down and focus even more so that you can answer a very specific question or set of questions for your audience, and also just be more focused with your business as a whole. And then if you're in that discovery phase, think about hobbies or activities that you do that maybe you have a question about that you can't find the answer to. That's how I started. It was not like, I am really good at growing succulents, I should probably teach people. It was, I really want to know how to grow succulents and how to grow them better. And I couldn't find it. So I did the research, I did the work, and now I'm sharing that with people who have that same question. And in some ways, that's a better way to go, because you know the struggle and the frustrations that people are facing. Like, I totally know how obnoxious it is to grow succulents on your windowsill. Like, they just don't look good after a couple months. They get really stretched out. But I wouldn't have known that if I was an expert succulent grower and I'd just been growing them perfectly forever. So it's much easier to relate with your audience and be more personal if it's something that you also have an interest in or can understand those struggles. So think about where you're at and figure out how you can niche down more, and then just do it and put it out there and see what works and see what doesn't. Thanks.